Okay, welcome to Seeker Circle. So tonight we're speaking about spiritual healing. Now, over the last few weeks, we've talked about energy healing and the human energy system. And so now we're going to try to define the difference between spiritual healing and just energy healing and how people work with that and what that means to us and our kind of thoughts and beliefs around that and how we work with it. So, some of the primary questions we're going to actually be discussing tonight with spiritual healing. How is spiritual healing performed? In case you've never had a spiritual healing session, is everyone able to have a spiritual healing? What gets in the way of being healed? Like, can we block that process? And when we look at spiritual healing in prayer, how come it doesn't work for everyone? And I'm sure each of us have had examples of knowing, oh, we prayed and prayed for this person and nothing happened anyway, or maybe God just said no, or there's a whole discussion around prayer and how that fits in to our spiritual healing. So in one of them, we were going to have Natalia was going to come tonight and talk to us about Reiki, but I can certainly speak a bit about Reiki. So some of the energy ones we've talked about, therapeutic touch, and a bunch of them are considered energy healing. Reiki is considered an energy healing unless you come from a spiritual background, because Reiki is channeling universal life force energy. And it has a wisdom of its own. So it's kind of like this divine energy. If you've got a Reiki practitioner who doesn't know anything about spirituality, they're going to call it an energy technique. We're just channeling this energy that's around all of us. Most people who do Reiki, a Reiki master from a spiritual tradition, will say that universal life force energy is God energy or divine wisdom. And so one of the differences between just an energy treatment that you would get with like therapeutic touch, Reiki believes it's channeling this universal life force energy. And so many Reiki practitioners consider that a spiritual healing because they're working with spiritual energy, right? So that's a very good example of spiritual healing that kind of crosses into energy healing. So the other one, for anybody who's come from a traditional Christian background, the idea of prayer or the laying on of hands, administration. I don't know if anybody has that in their background where you would go to ministers at the church. That would be a form of spiritual healing as well. So we have Daryl on the call has volunteered to give us just a little bit of perspective on this, specifically because Daryl is a long-time ordained minister, and part of his ministry is laying on of hands for what we call administration for healing of the sick. So, Daryl, I can't see you on my screen. Where are you? Do
I'm here.
You want to pop up and just give us a little bit of perspective on that kind of spiritual healing?
Sure. I'm probably, folks that are on the screen here, I'm probably not the right person to get to share this, even though Tina really emphasized a long time person, because as I put my thoughts together tonight about the prayer of healing, I went back to the inception of how we in Christian churches came about that. And when you go into and just about all Christian denominations believe in this prayer of healing. It's not just for one particular church. It's really from through the eyes of the community of Christ. It's for God's creation. Anyone can ask for this prayer of healing, and it actually comes in the Bible from the book of James. But the interesting part that not all Christian denominations think that the book of James is of divine intelligence. One of our major Christian denominations says, no, it's not holy enough. So even within the Christian denomination, there's judgment taken there. But from my personal background, I grew up within the community of Christ. I very much believe in the script, James, and I'll just read it to you so you hear a little bit of my background. It basically says that if there's anyone that are amongst you that are in trouble, and of course, different scripture versions use different language. So don't get hung up on the language, but think of the message as compared to the language. Let them sing songs of praise. If anyone is among you, sorry, is any among you that are sick, let them call for the elders of the church to pray over them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well, and the Lord will raise them up. And it goes on a little bit further than that. But I want to mention a couple of things with regard to that, folks here on the screen, that the Christian belief, and I can only talk through the lens of the community of Christ belief, and they gave the ministers an opportunity to consider the message as compared to the verbatim of the words. And I have before me here just a little tiny vial, and I just keep it because it's on my keychain, so it's always with me. And I carry that with me because I recognize that anytime I'm within community, wherever that may be, there may be somebody that is really, as you get to know folks and build relationships with folks, there may be a requesting, man, I wished I knew somebody that could help me connect with the holy. And I do want to emphasize when I say I'm not the right person, perhaps, because my concept of the holy, there's a zillion different names for what I know as God, the holy, the divine, the peaceable one, and so on and so on. In that particular scripture, it suggests to us as ministers in the Christian denomination that we get some oil, ordinary oil, olive oil from the drugstore. And what makes it sacred is nothing to do with the oil. What makes it sacred is how we're using it. And so Christian churches try to tie into that book of James. And what we basically do in a time of opening ourselves up to the presence of the holy, we simply pray upon this little vial of oil that is symbolic to what the scriptures are saying, that we bless it. And we simply say it in our prayer to the person in need. And it used the word sick. And we look at the word sick in a overall vision of what that means is people that are mind, body, spirit, that are out of sync with the holy or the divine, that they have the opportunity to ask a minister, whatever the denomination, or whether they're not even in a faith community, they have the same privilege, the same opportunity through Community of Christ's eyes, that they can seek out a blessing that we feel that is sacred, only because we believe that this divine being of the universe has created everything in sacredness, so everything about us. And as Tina shared earlier, and we talked about Reiki and so on like that, we within Community Christ are in the process of becoming community with the holy presence of the universe and trying to expand our minds. I said to you that I am very comfortable with the prayer of laying your hands upon the head of the individual and seeking God's blessing for that individual. It's really kind of like the picture before you that Tina has there. It's really the minister who comes before the person in preparation. The minister prepares themselves, whether it's a male or a female minister, they prepare themselves, recognizing that everything in God's kingdom or everything in the Holy One's kingdom is sacred. So it's an opening of ourselves to invite that presence of healing. I have no power. I'm useless that way, but at the same time, I have the ability to be open, to be that vessel, to, in the simplest way, to pour this little drop of oil on the head that has been consecrated for this event, and to seek God's blessing, or however you want to call God, that's fine, and seek that connection. Similarly, on the other side of the coin, the person who seeks out that connection with their knowledge of what this divine being is, whether it be a male, female, whatever the concept is, it doesn't matter. They want to connect with that presence of beyond themselves. They want to connect with that sacredness of beyond the physicalness, beyond trying to connect with something that we can't even put words to. So basically, with the preparation of the person asking for this prayer and the preparation of the person sharing in this prayer, it's an opening of ourselves within, without, and all around us in order to try and be open to the presence of the holy. I personally, and this is where I probably differ from some folks, and I know other ministers with Community of Christ are different more so than myself, is that as I try to get to know individuals, I try to recognize from where they're coming from. For example, Mary Jean, also a minister within Community of Christ, we have shared in this prayer of blessing or the prayer of healing, however you want to call it, and recognizing that this person comes out of a different tradition than we do. They may be a strong person that's connected with Reiki or connected. And I had to ask Mary Jean what that one word was, and I see if I can find it on here. Help me, Mary. I got too many notes here. What was it called again?
Diksha.
Diksha, yes. So I guess what I would like to suggest in a non-traditional, traditional way, that as Mary and I know some of these individuals and recognize their path of connection, we have very comfortably said we would like a bit of time, not just to do the traditional, but if you're okay with, and we explain it all, and we try to combine the immense difference that we all have in understanding this concept of the spiritual blessing. Because I personally feel that the spiritual blessing can be any modes of connecting to that presence, whatever we want to call it, then I feel very comfortable at times to incorporate and combine those opportunities. Going back to my traditionalist side of me, if there are times that I know that this person is a long time Christian and they only believe in the divine in one way, I'm happy with that. I have no problem with that, because to me, it's so easy to put this, trying to put words to this infinite is difficult. So why would I want to box in this infinite spiritual being that can only operate this way? So if it's a traditional person, and I know I shouldn't judge the people on their backgrounds, but they would be most comfortable this way, I would do it that way. If they're most comfortable in their explorations of different types of modalities of healing, I'm fine with that. That's just because of who I am. Tina, I'm probably way over my 5 minutes, but I'll stop there. If there's any questions, I'm happy to share that.
Okay, Daryl, that was awesome. What do you mean you're not the right person? You're the perfectly right person to speak about this. So you know what? That gave us a great reference, as well as, Daryl crosses over to embrace other traditions. But so that's great. He's speaking from the Community of Christ perspective. If anybody here is familiar with the Spiritualist Church, they also have lovely spiritual healing services. All the summers I used to go down to Lilydale, New York, every day they'd have these beautiful healing services out at the Healing Temple, and anybody could just go and get a healing. It was very, short but intimate and spiritual with the music playing, and that it was a lovely service. So there are, different denominations of religious traditions that have that sort of laying on of hands with prayer for spiritual guidance. Okay, so that's an amazing perspective to consider. And I think maybe that one is, the most known when you think of spiritual healing. But another amazing form of spiritual healing is for those who are really experienced with meditation. So with meditation, you can use meditation for a variety of reasons, but often people will use it to sit and call in spirit themselves. Heal my body, heal my mind, and I'm meditating as a form of prayer to call in divine guidance and divine healing. So this is a case where somebody would be doing it as a solitary practice, seeking divine spiritual healing as a form of prayer and meditation, bring it into the body and doing their own healing. So they're not using a Reiki practitioner, they're not using a minister or somebody formal to do it, that they are calling it in and doing it themselves. All right. And so there's lots of discussion around that. Even, do we need somebody else? Can we do it ourselves? Or is it available for everybody? You got to be kind of specially gifted in order for this stuff to work for you. And so there's a lot to consider in that realm, right? And so when we're talking about spiritual healing and how amazing it is, we do have to face those questions. This is one of the reasons I went beyond my church experiences and my church community to find different answers, because what gets in the way of being healed in spirituality? And many times in my growing up, when I went to church, we'd pray, we'd have prayer circles, or we'd have prayer chains, and we'd all pray for this person, and then they got sick and died. So I'm just like, okay, so what's with that? Did we need more people to ask? We didn't get enough people on that prayer chain. Or was our faith not strong enough, as some ministers? Oh, the faith wasn't strong enough, they couldn't do it. And there was all kinds of these silly answers that bothered me, right? Or sometimes God just says no, or God needed that person and had another purpose. I'm sure we've all heard these things, and it's kind of like, if God has another purpose, or God's going to make the decision anyway, why are we rallying the troops and praying for the healing in the first place? And so, my traditional church really could not come up with any brilliant answers that I found helpful, which is why I began to study energy healing and spiritual healing and why people don't heal. Carolyn Myss has this great book specifically on why people don't heal. And it really was quite insightful and very helpful for me when I was studying that. Okay, so these are big questions, and our own views on this. We don't just dialogue just for the fun of it, although sometimes it's fun. But if we're not feeling well, or we're sick, or we want some sort of transformation in our life, your beliefs on prayer and healing and accessing divine wisdom, that all becomes really important when you're trying to seek change or healing. So you want to look at that, because if there are things that block our healing, wouldn't you want to know if you had that before you tried to get healed and you had some sort of subconscious block? So there's lots of things that are to be considered. So we want to chat tonight about spiritual healing in general, all your questions and what gets in the way. And because if spiritual healing is a thing, like it's a real thing, and lots of people will give you amazing testimony on how they were healed miraculously. So if it's a thing, why can't we all access that? Why isn't it available for everybody? And how do we get it? Because we are all going to have times in our life where we need it and want it. So let's hash this about and consider these questions. So I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to stop the recording. And so if anybody watches this later, these are good questions. Go talk to your friends, ask your family members, have this kind of dialogue. And you know what, let's just bring this out in the open and talk about it. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording.